So this is task 2 then. This is the design document that covers learning outcome 2 across the 3 units. Okay, we've done all of the learning outcome 1s now. This document covers all of the learning outcome 2s from unit 15, 10, and unit 11. You can find this document on the website. So it's on the E4 project website. Here, task 2 design document. Obviously, I'll be posting the Profarm on Classroom also. So quick overview of the whole task, and then I'll break it down. So I'll make a video about the first few slides, a video for the next couple, etc. So this is only pass or merit criteria. So the first section, overview and audience, for example, is pass criteria for learning outcome 2 in unit 15, unit 10. The creative elements that we've got to do, character profiles and character drafts and so on, they're just pass elements for unit 10, 11, and 15 though. Okay, so instead of doing these things 3 times, we do them once. And it may seem like quite a lot, but at least we're not doing it 3 times in 3 separate projects. Okay, so that's the idea. The visuals we've got to create, same thing. Unit 10, Unit 11, Unit 15. Okay, so they're killing 3 birds with 1 submission. Storyboard, pass for Unit 11, 15. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, you get the idea. But this document is broken up into overview and audience, creative elements, the visuals, the storyboard, the SWOT analysis you need to do, some legal and ethical information, and then we've got to do a file formats evaluation. So it's quite substantial, quite significant. I will let you know how long we've got to do this, etc. As soon as I can. So it covers, first of all, a section overview and audience. So we do an interpretation of the brief. All right, and I've got some hints and suggestions down in the slide notes here. Okay, so the interpretation of the brief is how you are going to tackle it, alongside a sort of revision of the requirements. So it sort of proves and provides evidence that you have analysed the brief, but also how you are going to interpret various elements that are not explicitly required or explicitly laid out in that brief. So why it's needed, what is the medium of the product, etc., but also what are the implicit requirements, the explicit requirements, how are you going to interpret those? Got quite a bit on the target audience. Remember, this Latin text is all guidance in terms of quantity. So this bit here, you will be doing a bit of research yourself on the standard E4 demographic, what kind of things they like, how you're going to engage them and give them those things that they like. And then we have the character idea generation. This is the blue forms that we did before we actually broke up, when I handed out the cards with the cactus and the bottle opener and the moon and all that stuff on it. We filled out some blue documents. All you need to do for this slide is put a link in there, so it covers that idea generation stuff. We're then going to fill out a character profile, so you will need to know what character you're running with. In the next few lessons, you're going to have to decide what your character is. We've had a bit of time mulling it over. We have got to include some mind maps for our setting. So environment mind maps, 3 mind maps, 1 for each. We've got 3 environments, 3 settings to produce. And then a final profile for the setting. So again, you do your mind maps, you do your drafts, and then you decide on one, and we talk about that one here. You've got to develop the situation that you considered before we broke up, or something that you've come up with since then. You've got to break down your storyline synopsis by beginning, middle, and end. So 3 key scenes. And think about whether it's going to be driven by the character in some way, or if it's going to be driven by that particular specific situation, or a combination of the both, etc. And then here also consider how it's incorporating those core human values. We have some animation techniques to look at. So this is actually quite worthwhile, because at this point, when you're deciding what kind of character you're going to do and where it's going to be set, you've got no idea, I'm assuming, what animation techniques are going to be required to make this happen. So this is where you do a bit of research into animation. So I'll give you a couple of little grapple tasks, or at least we normally do when we're in in the classroom. So looking at how keyframe animation works, how shape keys work, how rigging works, and how UV animation works. Okay, and these videos that are linked here, I think, are mostly mine. So some of them will still be relevant, but most of them are 2.79 and will need me to update. But in terms of this slide here, it gives you an overview of what those techniques are, and you can write up benefits and limitations. You're then going to decide on those kind of animation techniques, what ones you're going to need to use to animate your particular character. You're all going to have a different character idea. Some are going to be more relevant than others. How that involves your prop and your environment. You've got to think about what sound you're going to use. A mood board, I mean, technically we probably should have done a mood board much earlier on, but what are you going to do? You're going to put a mood board in here and annotate it. This is where your character drafts are going to go. So check out all those slides. Okay, so there are 3 character drafts, and they need to be laid out like this. So you're going to have your characters from Blender splitting the screen. So we've got character draft 1, character draft 2, character draft 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then the final one having its textures applied. Annotations for all them. Final character with movement. Okay, so once your textures have been applied and you've decided how you're going to animate that character, you need to start playing with getting that character into different poses. So at least 3 different poses for that character in 3D in Blender. So whether it's been rigged and you've got an idea of the way the story's going to run and the character's got to play tennis or whatever, you need to try getting that character in a serving pose. You get what I mean. You don't need to be rigging, by the way, just at this point, just mention it doesn't need to be rigging. It could be your character is much more simple than that, and you can use basic keyframes like scaling it and rotating it and using the location keyframe to move it about within 3D space, or you could use shape keys to squash it and stretch it and stuff. Whatever it might be, you need to show some examples of how so it's the experiment again, how to get that character into key poses. Slides here for all your environment drafts. Some of the stuff you've done already, as you know. So environment draft 1, 2, and 3, and the annotations, and then your final environment. And that final environment will be developed a little bit further than the drafts. So keep your drafts as sketchy as you can. They need to be able to illustrate what you're thinking, but save your lighting and your textures and your materials and stuff for the final version. We've got a slide here for 3 draft static props, and then I decided rather than split it up into 2 slides, just put your draft static props, your 3 final props, and the annotations on one slide. Draft dynamic props and your final dynamic prop on one slide, and then we've got 3 slides for your storyboard, 3 or 4 slides. There's no requirement here. We'll talk more about this specifically in due course, but there's no requirement to use 10 frames or 10 shots in your animation, or 20 shots or 10 shots. There will be a requirement to use a variety of shots, though, and I'll be giving you a kind of checklist of things that you need to consider. So I'd like you to either use to use a wide shot, or use an up shot, a down angle, establishing shots, maybe at least one extreme close up, that kind of thing. So we'll talk more about that later on. And then we've got a slide for a SWOT analysis. So you need to consider the strengths, weaknesses, the opportunities and threats that exist for all your 3D models. So what are the strengths and weaknesses? What are the opportunities and threats for those elements? And then the same for the actual animation itself. Legal issues, so a bit of research on copyright, libel, and slander. So I've given some nice links here to things for you to read. So you've got that to look forward to, and then an explanation of what these legal issues are and how they may affect you, how you're going to resolve them. Same for ethical, so some links to read on the ASA website explaining what the issue is, so summarizing what you're reading here on the website and how that's going to affect you. A bit of information here on who the Advertising Standards Agency are and who Ofcom are, how that might impact production. And then this is distinction stuff, I think. Evaluating render formats. So we need to do a bit of research into what an AVI JPEG is, what an MPEG is, what a PNG is. These are the render settings in Blender, the render options. So this is a case of looking into why Blender gives you the option of rendering as a series of PNGs versus a movie file. Why does that exist as an option? So it's looking at the pros and cons of each one, what the situations are that are most relevant for those. And then you write up why you've chosen a particular render format. Okay, so we'll look into these slides in much more detail, and I'll break them down into maybe 3 or 4 videos, so that you can get your teeth into them in smaller portions. Thank you.